So let's pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day to praise you, and we ask you to help us to do it. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. All right. The box. All right. Okay, so hopefully this is a quick one, but if you have any follow-up questions, we'll go for it. The question is, again, please explain the difference between Episcopal and Anglican churches. All right. So, are you ready? The difference is who's in authority. All right, so we're all Anglicans, right? Any church that traces its lineage back to the Reformation in England is Anglican. The Church of England is Anglican, right? That's what Anglican means, is Church of England, okay? So some of the churches that came, okay, I'll step back. In the beginning,
what was the word?
Yeah, I'm not going that far back, but that sounded funny. That sounded funny. But at the beginning of Anglicanism, there was just the Church of England. And then there were a whole bunch of Church of England members who happened to live in the English colonies. And then there was a revolution. And so those Church of England members could no longer be faithful Church of England members. Because in order to be Church of England, you had to pray for the king. Right? And, I mean, Americans could pray for the king, but not in the words of the prayer book. Right? Not for our king. Okay? So, so what is an Anglican to do when he can no longer pray for our king? Right? Well, it turns out what an Anglican is to do is become an Episcopalian. Okay? That is, there were still Anglicans in the colonies, well, in the United States then, who wanted to keep their faith the way it was, but had to kind of start a new church that was in communion with the Church of England, but not the Church of England. Does that make sense? From this, well, soon after that, we hit the great explosion of mission work in the 19th century. Okay, the 19th century is sort of the height of the missions wave, okay, in a lot of ways. Lots of people going lots of places. Part of it is that there are still imperial powers, and so lots of Europeans can get places of other places in the world easily, right, or easier. And that causes other problems, but that's a whole nother conversation, okay? So now you have Anglicans all over the world, right? They're Anglican Christians because they trace themselves back to the Reformation in England and the Church of England, right? Sorry, I was thinking of 1066, and that made them C of E, and a good thing. But so 1066 and all that, it's a funny book. Anyway, so now we have Anglicans all over the world who are not English, right? And we already had Anglican churches in England and in Scotland and in Wales and in Ireland. Okay? So the concept was already there that you could have other churches in communion with the Church of England. Okay? So America was the first one, or the U.S. was kind of the first one, and then you ended up with the 38 or however many there are now provinces of the Anglican Communion around the world. Okay, all in communion with the Archbishop of Canterbury and other Anglicans. Okay. Some of those churches called themselves Anglican, like in their name, the word Anglican, and some of them called themselves Episcopal. Now, what does Episcopal mean? Bishops. Episcopal simply means that a church is governed by bishops. Episcopoi is the not, well, no. So the Church of England is Episcopal, right? Because it's governed by bishops. Under the king, right? With the king. The church, the Episcopal Church in the U.S. is Episcopal because it's governed by bishops with the General Convention.
Are they saying Episcopal in contrast to
no, Anglican.
But I meant like choosing that name, like obviously they are both.
I think, yeah, so I think what it is simply we're not Presbyterian, right? A Presbyterian church is a church governed by presbyters, elders, right? An Episcopal church is one governed by episcopoi, bishops, okay? A Congregationalist church is one governed by congregations, okay? So that just was to distinguish in a largely Protestant United States, right? It was to distinguish this Episcopal church from the other churches. Now, later on, you also get the Methodist Church, which is, I mean, if we're Catholic light, then Methodist is simply Anglican light, okay? But there's a whole history to that too. But they are actually governed by bishops as well. We just disagree that those bishops are actually bishops, okay? Because they're not in apostolic succession. But they're still governed by bishops. The title is bishop. So, and the Roman Church is governed by bishops, and the Eastern Orthodox churches are governed by bishops. Okay, so Episcopal is a descriptive word, but it doesn't really set us apart from a bunch of other churches. We just happen to be the ones who called ourselves Episcopal. Okay? And some of the other churches of the Anglican Communion do that too. Like the church in Spain is the Episcopal Church in Spain. I don't know why. It just worked out that way. But all of us are Anglican. Now, at the end of the 19th century, and I won't go into all of the ins and outs because honestly I don't remember all of them, but at the end of the 19th century, there was a group of Episcopalians in the United States that split off from the Episcopal Church over the Oxford movement. Okay? The church was getting too Catholic for them, and they wanted to maintain a very Protestant Episcopal Church, and so they became the Reformed Episcopal Church. All right. Later, in the middle of the 20th century, the Episcopal Church decided to reform/rewrite its Book of Common Prayer. And some parts of that were problematic. I even think they were problematic. I used the 1979 Book of Common Prayer, right? But I don't usually use Rite 2, particularly the Rite 2 Creed, because I think it's heretical. But that's a whole other question. Anyway, So then you had some churches split off from the Episcopal Church over that, right? And over the ordination of women to the priesthood. So you ended up with this alphabet soup of Anglican churches in the U.S. Okay? So you had the Anglican Catholic Church, and you had what was the other one? There were a bunch of them. Anyway, because then the people who split off split again and again and again, and so that you ended up with a mess. Okay. In 2003, the Diocese of New Hampshire elected Gene Robinson to be its bishop. Gene Robinson was a man publicly in a sodomite relationship with another man. Okay? He should not have been teaching Sunday school, much less be the canon to the ordinary, which he was before he became the bishop, or bishop. But at that point, a bunch of people around the Episcopal Church said, "You've taken our church away!" And they freaked out, and they wanted to leave too. In the middle of all of this, a bunch of the bishops of all that alphabet soup had gotten together and gone, "Hey, our division is a scandal. We ought to fix this." And so a bunch of those groups got together with the dioceses and parishes that were leaving the Episcopal Church. I should say separating themselves from the Episcopal Church. Bishop Stanton had a good point when he said, what does it mean to leave? But they were separating themselves from the authority of the Episcopal Church and formed the Anglican Church of North America. Okay? And which also includes some people in Canada. Right? So now the two kind of main groups, and that actually included the Reformed Episcopal Church from way back in the 19th century, okay, as well as some of those people who had split off in the 70s, etc. So, and a lot of these people ended up outside of the Episcopal Church simply because they could no longer submit to the bishops wherever they were, right? This wasn't people throwing a hissy fit and running away. Some of them did, but not all of them, right? Over the years, and not just the times I explained, but, as we got further into the 20th century, more and more of the bishops of the Episcopal Church were just openly heretical. Like, they were teaching contrary to the Bible, like clearly, right? And they were refusing to ordain people who believed the Bible, and etc., right? So people ended up wanting to be Anglican, but not in the Episcopal Church because they couldn't be in various places, right? The Diocese of Dallas didn't happen to be one of those places because our bishops have always been Orthodox believers. Okay? Whatever else we may say about them, they were always Orthodox believers. So, and we have a very kind of rich pastoral heritage in our succession of bishops here in Dallas, particularly. So, but many places like New York and New Jersey and Chicago and California, lots of places, like there just weren't bishops that you could submit to in conscience. And so people ended up eventually, most of them ended up in the Anglican Church North America. So now we have the Episcopal Church and the Anglican Church North America. Those are the two main groups. So if you say it's an Anglican church, you have to get from context whether you mean Anglican in terms of history or Anglican in terms of not Episcopal. Does that make sense? So some parishes and dioceses now around the U.S. call themselves Anglican because they're not Episcopal, but they're still Anglican. Okay? Boom! So it's a big historical mess, which should never have happened, right? Because our divisions are a scandal, but our divisions have been caused by the creeping heresy of the Episcopal Church, not anything else. Okay? Yes?
Okay, I think this is the right place.
Mm-hmm.
So, where does the is the apostolic succession just done?
No. Okay, that's a good question. So how do we know? It takes a bishop to make a bishop.
Actually, it takes
So why are the
one.
Methodists?
No, it does not. It takes one bishop.
Use three.
That's right. We use 3 bishops just to be sure.
Nobody knows who their lineage is.
That's right. Actually, usually there is, the way we keep records, there is a chief consecrator, right? Which is often, the archbishop or presiding bishop wherever you are, right? Not always, but often. And then you have at least a couple other bishops, right? Just to be sure. But it doesn't take 3, okay? So, So the question is a historical one, whether any given church has the gift of apostolic succession or not. And the question is answered by seeing whether the bishops who ordained their first bishops, right, were in apostolic succession themselves. And so it's just it's kind of an infinite regression. I'll come to you in a minute. I know, I see.
Actually, there is, yes.
Yeah, I mean, I know there is a chart.
There is a chart.
It's time to do a bishop to make something.
They do.
Really?
Yes. Here's the problem. If you go back far enough, you have to take it on faith that actually happened before that. Did I answer your question?
No.
Okay. I'll get back to you in a second. There is a chart. If you can look it up on the internet, right? The history of the papacy, say, it will give you a chart from St. Peter down, right?
There's one when Bishop Sumner was ordained.
There's a chart. There's a chart. But we have to understand when we use that chart or look at that chart, we have to understand that we don't always have complete historical records for all of that. Most of it. And there's also a question, an honest question about what is a bishop, right? So there's an early letter, right, post-apostolic, from Clement, right? There are a couple of them actually, and he is once again writing to the church in Corinth because, they're the ones that everybody has to keep in line, right? But he is seen historically as the bishop in Rome. Okay? And so some people will take those letters as authoritative, just as if they were written by the Pope now. Okay? But it seems pretty clear that Clement didn't really see himself as a pope the way modern popes think of themselves. Right? He saw himself as the leader of the College of Elders, right, in Rome. A fellow elder and the leader there, right? So did St. Peter, right? As a fellow elder, he writes. right? I adjure you, or whatever the verb is there. So there is that historical question, what exactly is a bishop? The question of apostolic succession is, how do we know, sacramentally, if you will, that this is the church that we have inherited, right? There are two pieces. One is the fact that it has been handed down from the apostles to bishops all the way down. The other is that it is still clearly the teaching of the apostles, right? So you can have one without the other. You can have either of those without the other. I insist on both because I'm a Catholic, right? But did that answer your question? Okay. You had a question.
So, is the reason that do the Methodists consider themselves in apostolic succession, or is that not an important thing to know?
Okay.
As bishop, it seems like they would.
Okay. So here's the story of the Methodists.
We don't need the whole.
I won't give you the whole story. I won't give you the whole story. But in the 19th century, not in the 19th, in the 18th century, sorry, you had the Wesley brothers and starting the method,
Yeah.
right? Those were all Anglicans.
Right. Yes.
Okay? They had this big following, and they were making converts and
Right.
building, what did they call them? Classes, right?
Yeah.
In the Americas.
Yes.
But they couldn't get any bishops
Oh, I see.
for those.
So they kind of had to create.
Neither could the Anglicans,
I see. Okay.
right? So at that point, what the Wesley brothers and the other Methodists did was they departed from the idea of apostolic succession the way we think of it.
Okay.
And they decided that it didn't take a bishop to make a bishop. It took a college of presbyters to make a bishop.
Got it. Okay.
And so they did.
Okay. So
So.
that answers that question.
Yeah.
So, but then, so like Methodists coming from Anglicans coming from Catholics, right? So like the Catholics
Ish, yeah.
don't recognize, why is like the Anglican Church saying to Methodists, oh, you're not part of the apostolic system?
Right.
Any different than the Catholics telling the Anglicans, you are also not part of this because you have
Okay.
converted at this point.
Right. So the question between the Roman Catholic orders and the Anglican orders is one of intention, not sacrament. So, I will. So the first Anglican bishops, like after the break with Rome, and after Mary killed off all the other, right, all the Anglican bishops, and then, right, so then you get Edward on the throne. So then you have a return to Anglican rule, but you need to make new bishops.
I see.
Okay? There were bishops who were left
I see. Okay.
from Henry's reign. Okay? Henry VIII.
Which still have the
sacramental connection.
okay.
So they lay hands on the next Archbishop of Canterbury, right? But they use a slightly different form of words because they are insisting on the Reformed understanding that part of your job, that it's not just a sacramental role, that it's also teaching and biblical and all of that. Okay? And I forget exactly what the change in words is. I have a whole book sitting on my desk waiting for me to read about this exact subject. And I've read about the Reader's Digest version. But so they changed the words slightly. At the end of the 19th century, after the Oxford movement, a bunch of Anglican priests went to Rome and said, hey, we think our orders are valid, right? We were ordained in apostolic succession. what do you think, Pope?
I see.
And so the Pope convened like this group of scholars to try and settle it. My memory, remember I'm yet to read the big book, but my memory is that they were actually split right down the middle as to whether they read the intention of the form. Like a 5-4 or maybe a 5-5. I don't know. I don't remember exactly. But they were split right down the middle as to whether Anglican orders should be considered in apostolic succession or shouldn't. And it came down to that question of intention, whether they intended to be in apostolic succession or not, or whether they were actually doing like a different thing. And the Pope basically made that decision for them since they were split. Because this was after the declaration of papal infallibility in the 19th century. And so the Pope simply said, okay, they're not. We're done. And that has been the understanding since the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th. The 1890s, I believe, is where that happened. So hang on, Vibrant. I'll get to you. So does that answer your question? Okay.
Two things, but I was really...
Vibert had a question too, but if you're following straight on this, I want to get to you. Okay, he says for you to go.
Well, my first direction was sidetracked to Lutherans, because
Okay.
I know a lot about them. But also on the same thing about the intention and apostolic succession. So when all these priests that were Episcopal that are now Roman Catholic priests,
Right.
and they get to stay married because they took those vows, what
Right.
did they have to do? Did they weren't received like we receive Catholics. They
They
had
actually,
to go back to seminary. What did they do?
some of them did, actually. So
The ones I know didn't, but maybe I'm wrong.
it depends on what kind of training you had.
Okay.
Right? So what happens is there is a special dispensation in the Roman Catholic Church called the pastoral provision for Anglican clergy who convert to Rome. Even if they are married, they can be ordained in the Western Rite. Right? Now, if they were just born into the Roman Catholic Church and then got married and then wanted to be priests, they would just be turned away.
It's really weird. Yeah.
It is really weird. It bothers me.
Yeah.
Okay. If they get married and then say, hey, I think I'm supposed to be a priest, their bishop will say, no. Right? But if they're an Anglican priest or bishop, right? And, well, if you're a bishop, you are a priest, but that's neither here nor there. If they're an Anglican priest and then convert to Rome, being married, then the bishop will at least consider it. Now, that's not a doctrinal problem, right? It is not a doctrine of Rome that priests must be celibate. Okay? They have Eastern Rite priests who are married. Okay? But in the Western Rite, the custom is that priests are celibate, and therefore, if you're married, you're just not qualified. Right? We're just not going to do that to you or to the church. Right? Because that would separate your, priorities. So what then happens is under your bishop, then, after you become Roman, under your bishop, you can then apply to be ordained. Because once you become Roman, you're not considered ordained, you're considered lay. Right? Anglican orders are not valid. But because you were in orders as an Anglican, they will consider what sort of training you need to become a Roman Catholic priest. That usually does not mean you need to go do a whole seminary degree. it often does mean that you need to do some training under a parish priest, or you need to do like a year of remedial study or something. But that's really up to the bishop and whoever else makes those decisions in the Roman diocese.
Okay, I have a question unless Viber.
Yeah, well, Viber?
Yes. I can imagine there were a lot of confusion with the Anglican.
Right.
What's the origination? How did that start? What happened?
Well, I just went through all of that, but Anglican simply means coming from the Church of England, and Episcopal simply means governed by bishops. So you can be Anglican Episcopalians like we are. You can be Anglicans who are Episcopalians but not in the Episcopal Church, right? You can be Episcopal without being Episcopalian. I know. Boom, right? Both of them are in their origin a descriptive term, right? They mean something. Anglican simply means, oh yeah, we're English, right? Episcopal simply means, yeah, we're governed by bishops. Over time, those have come to be associated with certain churches in certain ways, right?
So, capital E Episcopal.
Capital E Episcopal,
is
right?
Typically the Episcopal Church of
The Episcopal Church USA, or now we like to call ourselves simply the Episcopal Church, which is really silly because there are lots of Episcopal churches, right? But whatever. So.
Can we address Lutherans?
Yeah, so Lutherans. So Lutherans kept bishops for the most part, at least at the beginning. Lutherans are a mixed bag because some of the Lutheran national churches, like Sweden, kept apostolic succession sacramentally. Now they don't teach, they teach the Bible is wrong, so they're not in apostolic succession in the full sense, right? But they did keep it sacramentally. Whereas some of the Lutheran churches abandoned the principle of the episcopate as a separate order, right? So so for instance, the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod in this country, right? They don't have anybody that they call a bishop, right? They have, I forget what they call them. It's some sort of functional term, but it's one of the local pastors who then holds some authority over the whole local group.
Kind of like presbyters and all.
Right.
But St. Paul's itself, that congregation, they have a council and they have a presbytery. And they make all the decisions. The pastor does not. I mean, it's just kind of threw me off.
So you can go all the way back to the Middle Ages, and I'm sure further, but I've not read about it as much, right? Well, yeah, I have actually. I mean, you can go back all the way to ancient times. And there is some question over who gets to make what decisions, right? So in the medieval period, you had wardens, and they made decisions for the nave and everything else, and any sort of you often had various funds, right? Either a fund to take care of certain physical plant items, or a fund to take care of the poor in certain ways, or, right, whatever. And each one of those would have its warden, right? And people would take turns, and sometimes they were elected, probably not very often. I think they usually just rotated. Anyway, the wardens would make decisions over that thing, and then the vicar or the rector in England, would be responsible for the chancel or the sanctuary, right? And that went down to monetary, right? I mean, but the priest wasn't then dependent on the offerings of the people. He had an income associated with a living, right, associated with that parish. And so then out of that living, he was required to keep up certain parts of the church, right? That's one way of doing it, right? We do it completely differently. They do it completely differently, right? If you go back far enough, you'll see clearly in the historical record that bishops were elected by the people, right? The people and clergy would, and so if you go back to the story of Ambrose of Milan, right? And he's the provincial governor, right? He works for the state. And so he comes in, there's a big riot, right, over the election of the new bishop, and he comes in to, settle everything and create order. And they go, hey, Ambrose should be our bishop! Ambrose bishop! He's not even baptized yet. Right? He's one of our best bishops, right? Historically. He was a believer, he just wasn't baptized yet. Right? He's a catechumen. So there are all kinds of questions like that about how exactly politically does this thing work, right? And I'm not sure we've ever satisfactorily answered those questions. I'm not sure it matters as long as you actually have a community trying to follow Jesus together, right? In Ireland in the early years after St. Patrick, often the abbots had more political control than the bishops, right? They had bishops, but they would be monks in the abbeys under the authority of the abbot. And then the abbot would say, hey, they need episcopal services over there. They need some confirmations or whatever, right? We need to ordain some people over there. Go do that. Right? So exactly what authority does who have, where, and when? Those are sort of problematic questions, right? It's not clear. We have sort of a tradition in this country, in this church, right, of the vestry and wardens being responsible for the money in the physical plant, and the rector being responsible and therefore in authority over the worship and the spiritual state of the church, right? That seems to work pretty well. So that's fine. But it's not always historically clear that exactly how that works. That was a very long answer, I'm sorry.
So,
yes.
at the time that the vestry is meeting, they may make some kind of decision that, say, you disagree with.
They may.
And then the bishop steps in and solves.
Well, not necessarily. Right, there are some decisions that simply aren't important enough. Like, they have to be made, but they're not important enough for, anyone to really insist on their way. Right? Should we buy blue carpet or green carpet, right? Honestly, I might care, but how much? Right? It's not that you shouldn't care, it's just, is this really a priority? The vestry can vote contrary to my wishes. That's part of the point of the vestry. If they do, then we have a problem, right? We have a relational problem here, right? About if they do that on something important, right? They are not allowed to do certain things. They can't fire me. They have to go to the bishop for that. They can't not pay me. They have to go to the bishop for that. They can't not let me in the building. They have to go to the bishop for that. Right? I think that's the end of the list.
So the bishop is more doctrinal than just watching out for the behaviors.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is part of our problem these days, is what exactly is the job of the bishop? What I think the bishop's job is, he may not think it is. And we've run into this, right? You know, or even if we say the same thing, right? A lot of us would say the job of the bishop, like the role of the bishop, the charism of the bishop, is to maintain the unity of the church, right? To be a visible sign of and maintain the unity of the church. Well, to me, that means cracking down on heresy. That's your whole job. You got to maintain the unity of the church. We're not in unity. That guy says you can marry men to men. I mean, and that's just like a moral question. Forget the doctrinal questions. I mean, come on, right? That's not what our bishop thinks his job is to discipline clergy who he thinks are heretics. By the way, he agrees with me on who's a heretic and who's not. More or less. We might find somewhere where we disagree, but on the whole, we agree on that. We just disagree on what his job is. Right? Well, and I don't have a rock solid historical case to make there. It just is the thing that makes the most sense to me. Like, why have bishops if that's not what you do? Right? He disagrees. So
you're saying bishop right now. Are you talking about George or are you talking about Nancy?
Right now I'm talking about George.
Okay.
I mean, there are maybe that many bishops in the Episcopal Church who actually even agree with me on who the heretics are, right?
Yeah,
but Bishop George is one of them.
Yeah, when George.
Yes. He's low church, so you can kind of get away with that.
We pray for George. When he came and talked to the vestry after convention, his point was he saw the heretics, and they could not do that under his authority. They had to get another bishop to do it. So that was.
But that's not discipline in my mind.
Yeah.
Right? That what's the difference between allowing it and allowing someone else to allow it? Because that's what he's doing.
But he's not allowing it.
But he's allowing someone else to allow it. What's the difference?
If they choose to do that, but they still have to pay the diocese, and I don't think anyone would have done that, to my knowledge.
Well, I don't know the situation there because he and I have talked about it. We have respectfully disagreed. He's been kind to me, and we're okay, right?
But to me, the way he handled it, it's not perfect in your eyes. But
right.
I thought it was pretty clever.
But it is pretty clever.
You have to pay us, but
right.
And then you have to get you another bishop.
But that also means they still have a vote at convention. They still get to decide about the fate of the diocese and the doctrine of the diocese. So, anyway, we're not going to solve that problem. My point is that I don't have an ironclad position here. I think I'm right, but neither does he. Right? We're all muddling through this, right? That's the whole thing about what is the job of the bishop? What exactly does who have authority over when and where? We kind of have an answer to that, but not a perfect answer, not a perfect pragmatic answer. Yes.
I have a related question, but if you prefer, I can put it in the box for another.
No, go ahead. We only have a few more minutes. Why don't we just finish off this one?
So earlier you were talking about how the Catholic Church allowed in Anglican priests who were married, even though that's not like the.
They don't allow them in as priests.
Well, they have in the past. There was like that time when they could.
No, they have never allowed them in as priests. They have allowed them in as laymen, but then they will consider ordaining them. Not all Anglican priests who go to Rome are ordained. In fact, my old boss was not. He was refused.
Okay. So there's about 70 or 80, right, in the United States that I'm aware
I actually don't know any numbers. You might be right. There might be more.
Number I heard.
Yeah, I don't know.
So,
Yeah. I mean, if you're not married, then it's not a question.
well, my question,
Right?
my question
So-
refers to, so you were talking about Bishop, your desire to see Bishop Sumner do a little bit more in the heretic.
A lot more, actually, but that,
Okay.
and he's not alone. I want all of them to do a lot more. But
Sure, fair. So my question is, we don't have to go into like any specific details about any particular people in
Sure.
the diocese.
Sure.
But say, do you think that a bishop should defrock somebody? I mean, you were talking about like the moral issues, that would be like one direction.
Right.
But do you think that, for example, like for a woman who is a priest, who is otherwise a faithful priest,
Right.
should that person, kind of like what we were talking before, can they continue in their duties, kind of like somebody who's already married becoming a priest can
Right.
continue? You wouldn't want to like unvow their marriage, like.
Right. You get into these historical messes, right?
Sure.
And they all involve, lest we forget, they all involve individual people, right? And you're affecting their lives, right? Of course, what has happened has affected my life as well, right? In negative ways. But it's hard because you want to, you got to speak the truth in love. You want to maintain unity. The church hasn't always done right. We as Anglicans can say that, right? We have not always taught the right thing. So what do you do about that, right? And it gets into questions like, in Africa, well, this is a slightly different question, but similar, like people who convert to Christianity and have multiple wives. Right? What do they do? Right? I mean, they actually have responsibility for these women, right? They can't send them away. So they stay married.
Particularly like
Yeah.
in authority in the church
Right.
who don't fit the strictest definition
Right.
of
Right.
priest. Like,
Right.
would you say that a bishop should defrock them, or like let them carry on unless they're teaching versus just like their identity versus their teaching?
Right.
Does that make sense?
So I would add a third category. I would add behavior.
Okay.
Okay.
Sure.
So there's identity. There's just who you are
Right.
as a kind of icon, right?
Okay.
There's behavior, that is what you do as that icon, and then there's actual teaching. What you teach is the truth. I think that any of those that clearly contradict Scripture and the unbroken teaching of the church
Okay.
ought to be disciplined.
Okay.
I'm not actually sure what we're talking about in terms of identity,
Well,
but the other
for
two
me,
at
I'm thinking,
least.
like if you have a woman who's a priest,
Right.
which
And
has been
that-
for 50 years or whatever.
Right. That is a pastoral
Otherwise
question.
faithfully doing
Right.
the thing. Like, how would you discipline somebody?
So
for their...
no. See, I have friends who are faithful women.
Right.
They love Jesus. They think they're priests. I disagree.
Or deaconesses or whatever. I mean,
Well, actually, deaconesses is a whole different question.
Okay.
Yeah, but that's really after the fact. It's really a pastoral question, how to deal with it, than it is a doctrinal question.
Why?
Right? Because you're dealing with individual people, right?
Okay.
It's also a political question, right? I mean, if we disagree and it is not the clear teaching of Scripture, right, then what do we do about that? Even if we change our minds later.
Okay.
See what I mean? In terms of the pastoral and political questions, that's sort of a different area, although it's related. I mean, you've got it. But I think, whatever we do should be in charity, right? Even if we have to go and defrock somebody, right? And the other thing is we have procedures for disciplining clergy, and the bishop doesn't just get to announce that you're defrocked, right? I mean, what he has to do is put you on trial, right? But I think he should. I think he should put all these guys on trial, right? So, anyway.
I was trying to think. I'm going to be specific.
Go ahead.
Biegler.
Father Biegler, yes.
Yeah.
Jim Biegler.
It was my understanding was he disciplined or was he defrocked in our diocese? But he went to another diocese.
Okay, I know the answer to this.
For those of us who weren't here.
What's that?
For those of us who weren't here.
Father Biegler was the rector here.
Okay.
He had an extramarital affair. He refused to repent of that. He left his wife, married that other woman. Okay? Left the parish.
Okay.
Bishop Stanton put him on trial.
Good.
And he was disciplined. Now, the word defrock is really an informal word. Like, that's not an official canonical word. Okay? The official canonical word is deposed.
Okay.
All right? So he was deposed from the ministry. In other words, he couldn't of the Episcopal Church. He could not exercise priestly ministry in the Episcopal Church. That didn't make him not a priest, right? He's forbidden from doing anything with it.
Inhibited.
No, deposed. Inhibited means you still have the rights of a priest, but you're kept from doing anything sacramental.
Yeah.
Right?
So he became a priest in Illinois.
I'm not done with the story yet. So he was deposed. Later, he moved away. Later, he went to one of the bishops in Illinois and requested to be reinstated. And that bishop did so.
I've got one question.
Yes.
You know the guy.
Well, and this is, and the thumbs down is not a sort of retributive thing, right? It's not about he's a bad dude, right? That's not that. I don't even know that. I never met the man, right? I just know that is not who we want representing God to the people and the people to God.
Agreed.
Right? Back to the African thing, right? Those men are required to keep all of their wives, but they are not going to be ordained because they are not a good icon of Christ. Right? No, they are real wives. Well, that's sort of a legal Western thing. I'm talking about the African churches, right? Christian churches. They have often, not always, but often come to the conclusion that those men should keep all of their wives as wives, but they are not candidates for holy orders and will not be until they get down to one, right? They should be the husband of one wife.
I have one thing to add, though.
Yes.
And that is the Illinois bishop
Yes.
wrote and had telephone conversations with Bishop Stanton.
Yes.
And Bishop Stanton agreed that he was repentant at this point
Okay.
and did it. So, but the
Yes.
Illinois bishop didn't just override what Bishop Stanton had done.
Yeah.
So
And actually, the bishop who, yeah, it's kind of like, yeah. And actually, the bishop who did that is, I'm a fan generally, but I think that was a bad call. So, and there are very few bishops I can say that about that I'm a fan. So, you know. Last one.
Is there a sanction committee that
The discipline and all that? There are various kind of functionaries of the diocese. So one of the priests of the diocese, I don't think it would have to be a priest, maybe it does, but I know that one of the priests of the diocese has a legal background, and actually I don't think he's a lawyer. I think it was when he was an officer in the Marine Corps, he ran a lot of courts martial. Anyway, he is like officially, he's called the intake officer, and so any complaints that come to the diocese about any of the clergy go to him, and then he kind of runs the process. He doesn't have all the authority, but he works the process from there.
Is it going back there?